Hi there, this is Alvin, and welcome to the Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search marketing and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, our guest is none other than Josh Reason, a full-time domain investor and recent founder of DNWE.com, a domain name wholesale exchange platform aiming to empower domain investors to competitively, quickly, and easily liquidate the buying and selling of their domains. Today, Josh and I discuss how flipping smartphones, and yeah, I did say how flipping smartphones led to him discovering domain investing. We'll also discuss why and how Josh is advocating to cast greater visibility upon the domain industry by encouraging, educating, engaging, and empowering all industry players, such as domain investors, buyers and sellers, brands, brokers, just to name a few. Josh also shares a bit about DNWE.com and the importance of a liquidation platform for today's domain buyers and sellers. And last but not least, we talk about getting in behind the curtain of a few of Josh's latest domain sales and also discussing the present and future state of the domain industry. So with that, Josh, welcome and thank you for making time to join us today.
Hi, Alvin. Thanks a lot for having me. It's great to be here. As you said, I'm founder of DNWE.com and I'm a full-time investor.
So, Josh, briefly share with the listeners just a bit about yourself, who you are, your professional and personal background, probably starting with the accent. I mean, it sounds like you're from Texas, right?
There you go. So I grew up in the UK, from Bristol, England. I then moved to Spain. I actually lived in Barcelona for 5 years, from the age of 13 to 18. I was actually I played tennis in a tennis academy there, and studied in an international school. So the idea was actually for what I wanted to do is I wanted to be a pro tennis player. That didn't end up happening, so I ended up going to college in the US and played college tennis. And that kind of is a little bit about my background. I worked in fintech for the majority of my life. For the majority of my career, we should say.
I was like, man, it ended?
Yeah.
Then who am I talking to right now?
Yeah. So, I worked in fintech for the majority of my career, while also kind of part-time in domain investing during that whole time. That kind of stint in the fintech world has recently come to an end for me, and I've gone full time into the industry of domain investing, and I've obviously got my platform DNWE that's taking up a lot of my time at the moment. But yeah, I spend a lot of time in the industry. I typically get on the phone with investors quite frequently, just because I enjoy talking with them. I enjoy discussing the industry, and I certainly would like to continue to advocate for its growth.
Gotcha. So then tennis is pretty much kind of what has paved the way for you to a certain extent. And so, like, what college did you attend or graduate from?
Yeah, so I went to Auburn University, Montgomery. They are basically a sub school of Auburn, the big university, and they're a Division II school, so NCAA Division II. It's based in Alabama, and I was there for 4 years.
Interesting. And so then, and like I alluded to there in the beginning, so you had told me the story in our pre-call of about how you were flipping phones or why you were flipping phones. So explain that whole process, because that literally blew my mind.
Yeah, so obviously, I don't think I've ever told this story before, and I've been on quite a few podcasts and main Sherpas, so this is going to be a first. But essentially, as an international student here in the US, you have very few options in terms of what you're able to do work-wise. So I spent the majority of my time working in the grounds department to make money in the beginning, and that was because the university was able to give me a job working in the grounds, and that involved me having to wake up very, very, very early to work for a very low income wage. And then, I would do that for 3 or 4 hours early in the morning before going off to practice or our fitness sessions. And it was just, it was very, very tiring. So I obviously wanted to find a different way to make money. And I've always kind of been a sales type person. I think when I was much younger, I used to sell candy at school. Things like that. So I decided that I knew a lot about phones. I was interested in all the new technology that was coming out. So I looked for some ways that potentially I could buy phones when people were looking to cash out. It's essentially very similar to the wholesale market in domain names. If somebody wants to sell a phone because they got a new phone, they will occasionally, sell it for below the retail price tag when they want to sell it quickly. So I started buying phones. I went through Craigslist. I went through eBay. I started repairing old phones that were sold as broken, and then I could repair them and sell them as working condition. And I started to scale that up throughout my time in college to the point where pretty much everyone in our athletic department, at least 100+ people, maybe more, had phones that were bought from me. And obviously I sold to many other people outside of the athletic department, but it got to a point where I was kind of the go-to guy for buying a phone.
Man, I need an upgrade. Josh is my guy. Interesting. So then from flipping phones, so obviously that there are parallels between it and domain investing. So how did that then lead you to discover domain investing?
Yeah, so as I was coming to the end of my senior year in college, I just accepted a job out here in California, and I realized that I wasn't going to be necessarily flipping phones for the rest of my life, and I wanted to find another way to make money without necessarily needing to be in any physical location to do so. So I started looking online in terms of what basically how to make money online. How do people make money online from their home? And I went through tons of different things. I think I tried various things. I think I've tried to open up various e-commerce stores and do the drop shipping thing and all kinds of stuff. And right before I came out to California, I found out about domains, and I think I stumbled across something that led me to Name Pros. I ended up spending a lot of time in there. I ended up buying a lot of names, and I kind of got hooked to it.
Now, when, I guess in terms of time, what year was this?
So this was I first found out about domain investing just early 2014.
Gotcha. Now, and so early 2014. Now, how long did it take you to get to your first sell?
I think I may have sold a few things here and there on Name Pros to other people for cheap, but real first sale, I honestly probably took me about a year. I think the first 4-figure sale that I had was helicams.com, which I think I bought it for $100 and I sold it for $1,000, something like that. Which was when the drone industry was kind of getting big. But yeah, it took me a while. My first year of buying domains was, horrific. I just made mistake after mistake and bought rubbish names and continued to do so. Didn't didn't really know too much what I was doing. But what I did have going for me is that I spent a lot of time, I made a lot of mistakes, I spent a lot of time learning and reading. So, I was improving. It was just maybe not as quickly as I would have liked.
Do you remember what your very first name that you purchased, or names? Do you recall any?
Yeah, I mean, really bad. The two off the top of my head were hiscash.com, HISCASH, and usales, the letter U, SALEZ.com. I purchased that one because I kind of thought of some kind of marketplace for buying and selling stuff. Like, I mean, just horrific.
Well, wait. So why is usales.com? Why is it a bad name or not a good investment?
I mean, so
you and I know, but kind of share it with your given wisdom of today. If you only knew now then what you know now, it'd obviously be different. But yeah, go ahead and explain.
So if you take away the last letter of that domain name, it's okay. If you take away the first letter of that domain name, it's okay. If you take away both of them, it's a very great name, right? It's obviously sale.com. But when you have both of those random letters on the front and the back, I mean, it's just really bad. I mean, it's and the Z or Z, however you want to say it, at the end is obviously in replacement of an S. So I mean, there's so many things wrong with that, right? If you're starting a company, first of all, it's completely confusing. The U could stand for it could be YOU, but obviously I just put a U on the front. The Z could have been an S. And then it just doesn't make sense from like a brand perspective. Nobody's ever gonna call their website or company that. So, I think that early investors, just kind of convince themselves that a domain has some kind of value. Because they can't find anything that's available. So they keep going until they find something that's available. And then they're so amazed that they finally thought of a name that's available. They convince themselves that it has some value.
That's a great point, because the reality is, it's kind of like you said. I mean, it took you a better part of a year to go through the trial and error, the buying. So, I mean, in terms of totality of how much you invested, what did you invest in from a dollar amount in that given year?
Yeah, I mean, so at that time I was obviously just graduating as a college student. I didn't have a lot of cash. I was making my money from flipping phones. So we're talking, less than $5,000 in cash that I had available to invest. I think it was probably more, but more in between. Probably invested in the first year about $2,000 to $3,000. I think the majority of what I invested in were like hand registrations and maybe one or two names here and there from the aftermarket, but not really that much.
So, I mean, is that a recommendation in terms of starting with hand reg, or where would you typically, likely encourage folks to start in terms of
I was speaking to someone yesterday who was interested in getting started in the industry, and my honest opinion is that for anyone that wants to start in the industry, the first thing that they should do is that they should listen to the podcast, they should read the blogs, and they should watch Domain Sherpa. If it continues to intrigue them, I think from there I would go and sign up for DN Academy personally. It wasn't around when I started, but in terms of a course that's available that kind of consolidates everything that you need to know into an easy to learn course, I think that they've done a phenomenal job. So I would probably do that, and I would do all of that before ever buying a domain. And then when you start buying domains, I would only look for stuff that other people want to buy at the beginning, because you just don't know enough about the market. You haven't had enough experience to be able to go in and say, oh, I'm going to pick this close out, or I'm going to hand register names, right? Like I can hand register names that I think might have an opportunity to sell today, but that's after seeing so many sales and studying this for so many years. So what I would say to new investors is, hey, bid on stuff that other people are bidding for, right? If you win a domain at auction for $200 at Namejet or expired auctions or whatever, you know that there was at least one other person that was willing to pay $199 for that domain. Ideally, there were a few other people that were in that auction that expressed interest in that domain. And then I said the same thing about the platform that we have at the NWE. We, Josh and I look at all of those names and we've said, okay, like we think that name is liquid for at least this amount. So we're going to curate it into our platform so that you can say, like, from a buying standpoint, that there are other people that think that domain is valuable as well. So from an investment standpoint, if I'm newer, I want to put my money into something that I know that I can get money back out if I need to.
So does that, I mean, because to a certain extent, it's like I can hear listeners in my head going, okay, so Josh says that, I should look for other domains that, likely have bids to them. So one of the things that at least I know starting out for me was getting in and seeing there's a domain out there. It has one bid on it. I put a bid in. There's a proxy bid that, is initiated or engaged at that moment. And it basically places bids until whoever is at the top is winning. So is it that you want one person involved in that auction, or is it that you really want probably 2 or 3 people involved in the auction? Which is it and why?
One person is okay. The more people that are in the auction, the better, because that's an indication of how many more people, are interested in that domain name. So you know that you're not the only one, or you're not the one of two. This is an interesting topic. I'm not saying that you can't be successful hand registering names or waiting for names to go to closeouts and buying closeouts, because I buy those names all the time in closeouts. I do that all the time. I do that because of the data that I'm able to look at and all the knowledge that I've accumulated in terms of what sells. And I feel confident in myself that I've seen something that maybe has been overlooked by other people, and I think that it has a chance in selling within the next 5 years or whatever my plan, my long-term strategy might be. But for a newer investor, they don't have that experience to work off. So it's I think that if you're hungry to start investing in domains, I think it's more important for them to actually honestly put a little bit more thought into and then maybe a little bit more money into each domain name that you buy, because of that validation that it gives you that there are other people that were also interested in that name.
You actually sparked something else just in my mind of just kind of hearing you in terms of saying, you have a strategy for a given name often. So then how often do you invest in a name to where do you already have a set period of time that you're saying, I'm willing to allocate X amount of dollars across these many years, to renew this domain? So is it something like, hey, when I buy a domain, I typically know that I'm in for 3 years or 5 years. So like me personally, I look at it and I go, I'm at least into a domain, a given domain for sometimes 5 years, hands down, So do you take that same approach, or, is it a case by case basis?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of points there. I mean, I know that there will be many names in my portfolio that I will never sell, right? Just because that's how the numbers play out. That's how the odds will work. I mean, there will just end up being some names that I have that won't get the right offer during my lifetime, or at least a lifetime of domain names. Hopefully I live a little bit longer than that, but we'll see. But generally, what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, let's say I just spent $1,000 on, let's say 100 names. What I'm really looking at is, hey, within the next 2 years, within the next 2 years, am I going to be able to get an ROI on that $1,000? Will one of those names sell for my price tag, which is almost always going to be over $1,000. And if the answer is yes, then I know that that's a good investment, because after that point, I'm in the green, right? But I'm not investing in those names right now with the mindset that I'm going to be in the green even 12 months from now.
Got it. So that's an interesting take. And I kind of, like I said, I mean, I pretty much have some of the same takes, although, I spend probably most of mine are in closeout auction purchases. And I probably say personally, for me, I made that decision only because in like the last 5 years, I've just seen things skyrocket in expired auctions in terms of names that you used to could get for, probably $50 to $75, maybe even $100. They're getting up in the range of $600, $700, $800, $900. And so I don't know if that's rather a sign of, hey, more people are interested, or, what do you make of that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because there's lots of different levels of domain investing, right? There's these names that, like you said, you could have picked up for $50 to $100 4 or 5 years ago when I was getting started, and now they're going for $900, $1,000. That's such a huge amount more, and I think that actually those kind of names will continue to. I think they'll hold their value pretty well. I think it would be. I think with all of the people that are coming into the industry and all of the businesses that are moving into a more digital framework and focusing on their online presence, it would be counterintuitive to think that those type of names will go down in value. They might fluctuate slightly, but over the long haul, I don't think they're going down in value from here. And then in terms of competition to get those names, that's going to go up, and that's 100% sure, because we're going to see more investors in this in the domain industry. I can almost guarantee that. So I speak to someone nearly every day right now who's interested in getting in, and I get, I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I get messages from people every single day that are like, hey, I want to start investing in domains. I want to start, doing this. And that's just me personally. The amount of people that are going onto and seeing name pros, I'm sure the numbers are huge. And yeah, I see more investors in this market year over year. Personally, I see new people coming up all the time, and I think that as people start to realize that these domains are truly a different type of asset class, a different type of investment that they can diversify with, I don't see why you wouldn't get an influx of more investors. So. Yeah, this is my prediction, and I'm not going to say it's 100% sure, but I would be very, very surprised if in the next 2 to 5 years we don't see a big influx in more people investing in domain names.
And that's interesting because so you and I, we both attended NamesCon 2020, and so here in Austin, and to me, definitely want your take on it as well. But to me, it seemed, if I'm comparing it to NamesCon to 2018 back at the Tropicana out in Las Vegas, when I compare that crowd versus to this crowd this past year, it seems as it would have made me to believe that the industry is actually shrinking.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. The general. The Austin conference in general was had more of an intimate type feel, and I'm not sure. I never actually circled back with anyone at NamesCon to ask what the attendance rate was versus what it was the previous year in Vegas. But I think timing would have been was a slight issue with the virus as well. I know a lot of people that didn't end up going, and they didn't end up bringing their team as well, just because of the timing. And then also it's the fact that a lot of people enjoy going to Vegas.
Right.
And I know that while some people were ready for a change, there were a lot of people that were quite upset. So
Correct.
that might have been one of the reasons as well.
Well, you hit on another point, because from an international, I know a lot of folks who were international definitely had, their challenges in terms of getting, direct flights. And so, if you wanted a direct flight, into Vegas, it's probably easy to do, or at least minimize the number of, jumps that you had to make from your origin to place of destination.
Yeah, exactly. And then, also, I'll say this, is that domain investors are quite private in terms of like the type of person that is in the industry or has been in the industry in the past. Very few share what they're doing publicly, because they don't want to draw attention to the way that they make money. Right? It's not
Right.
it's not rocket science. People don't talk about their strategy in investing. They don't report their sales in domains. They don't do any of that, because they don't want people to know what's making them money, and they don't want increased competition in the space. I look at things personally a little differently, which is why I'm probably a lot more open with what I share publicly than most. But that is the reality, is that a lot of people don't like talking about what they're doing.
Right. It makes me think, rather, in terms of, I'll tell you, but likely after everything has been sifted through.
Yeah.
It's like after the fact. So it's one of those things of, as it's going on. So you probably have people that are out there making just, gobs of money, if you will, right now, that they probably wouldn't be willing to share until a year from now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's interesting. So do you think that obviously there will always be a percentage that will be that way, but moving forward into the future, do you think that more of the new investors are likely going to be open, or, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be as open as I possibly can without hurting my own acquisition opportunities in the meantime. And I probably do actually reveal more than I should, because we're all in competition to try and get the best domains that we can, and essentially make the best investments. But I think that by bringing that, I look at it from a different angle, right? I think by bringing more investors into the industry, it will help legitimize an industry that is unfortunately still frowned upon by most people on this planet.
And squatters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if I was to have a conversation with some people in my family, they would refer to people that have domain names who are not using them as squatters.
Exactly.
So
what's the difference though, in terms of how do you handle that type of conversation?
Yes. So, I mean, it's a very frank conversation. It's the fact that a cyber squatter is someone that's intentionally trying to infringe on someone else's trademark. It's not anything that a domain investor wants to do. It's nothing that I want to do ever. I don't want to be involved in anything that has to do with infringing on somebody else's trademark. Now, that comes with a few with a lot of caveats, because trademarks are complicated, and trademark law is complicated. So, that's another area that I think, in order to be a good investor, you need to have a very good understanding of what's infringing and what's not.
Indeed.
So.
Indeed, and that's the thing that it's like I believe that most investors at some point, we've likely all probably registered something, whether we knew it or not, that infringed upon. But I go, it's to me, it's what do you do once you know that it is. And in certain cases, it's like I remember starting out, and I think it was brought to my attention that I had like two or three that I just did not realize were, and I instantly, dropped them.
Yeah.
And so I go, it's a matter. I go, I don't think it's a matter of if, it's when, and then what do you do?
Well, it's also usage, right? I mean,
Right.
people get confused about this all the time, but at the end of the day, the most valuable domain names are the ones that have dozens, hundreds of trademarks for that exact match of the domain. For example, I don't know, Bloom, right?
Right.
And Bloom.com is a seven-figure name, and it doesn't. And I'm sure there are hundreds of trademarks out there. Not one of those trademark owners is entitled to owning Bloom.com. But if they do, if there's a company called Bloom and they have a trademark for, that is related to financing small businesses, and then I put, small business financing links all over the landing page of Bloom.com, that's infringing. But you just don't do that, because there's obviously so many other uses that you could use the domain for. So it's all about usage. And hey, I'm not an expert on trademark law, and nothing that I'm saying should be should be taken out of context, right? But all
Right.
I'm saying is that there's a lot more to it than, hey, is there a trademark or is there not a trademark?
Right. And that's something that I know that DN Academy hits on. And basically I know that they dedicate a section to that, I believe. And so that's it,
Yep.
for those who are listening and, you want to get educated. It's, I agree with Josh in terms of, hey, you certainly want to get your hands on dnacademy.com. And I know for some, they'll say, well, it's going to cost me. And it's like, well, it's going to cost you either way. If you do the course, it's going to cost you, and that's going to cost you in a good way in terms of being a great investment, or you don't do it and you may run afoul to some of these things that we're talking about.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, it'll cost you in some way or another. I'm not saying that you have to obviously use that particular course, but if you don't
Correct.
invest in your own education into investing in this specific industry, then you'll invest by making the mistakes.
And a bought lesson, that's a good lesson there. And it's best if you don't have to buy it yourself. Learn from someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Learn from someone else. So then, kind of shifting gears here, Josh. So, share with us a little bit about how DNWE got started. Like, where did this brainchild come from?
Yeah, so this has been actually in my mind for a long time. The fact that it really stems from the fact that you see how easy it is for GoDaddy to liquidate expired domains, right? Or Namejet to liquidate expired domains, and you think from a domain investor standpoint is why is it not easy for me to liquidate my domains? And if I do want to liquidate my names, what are the options that are available to me? And obviously, at the time of this is going through my head, the options are Flipper, which is a public auction, Namejet, public auction, or a GoDaddy public auction, or list the names on NamePros in a public forum. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better platform for investors where they can, where their names are going to be a lot more visible. They can get the eyeballs from other investors, and they can, get money quickly for the domains that have liquid value. So that's where it came from. And then I started building it in about August of last year as a kind of like a side project. Not really. I wasn't 100% sure how it would be received, but I knew that it was a hole in the industry that I thought that I could potentially fill, and I'm still that's still TBD, but so far so good.
Yeah, I was about to say. I mean, and if anything, what I kind of chuckle and laugh about to myself is your timing, man. Talking about impeccable timing to coincide with COVID. And so it's like obviously you can't plan things like that, but it certainly does help, to have people probably at home in front of computers and likely looking for other sources or secondary sources of revenue. And so all in all, in terms of the platform, so where is the platform at today? I mean, how many users, any transaction stuff that you can share that's going on?
Yeah, let me just. We have 15 transactions in escrow right now. We just hit 50, I think, a week ago, and now we're
Nice.
already at 70. So I mean, we've been on like five a day ish for the last week. And yeah, I mean, we've done, I think, about 60,000 in sales,
Nice.
maybe a little bit more. So the average transaction size is right around kind of the $1,000 mark, which I think it's more now. I think it's about 70,000 in sales, right around the $1,000 mark, average transaction size. So it's one of those things where we're actually capturing the lower end of the market, which wasn't really that easy for people to liquidate before. You talk about liquidating, high value names, the 15, the 20, the 25,000. Those go in the newsletters a lot. There's obviously a lot of focus on those because the brokers are able to make good money on them, but very little focus on the lower end names. And while we've had some sales, we've had a $9,000 sale, we've had a couple of $5,000 sales, and we've got names listed on the platform for 20, 25, 30K or whatever. We've definitely so far seen a lot more traction on the lower end.
Gotcha. So then let's help classify, if you will. So in terms of liquidation, so are we talking about domains that are nearing expiration, or what are we? I mean, is it that the domain is about to expire, or is it just, well, hey, this domain probably has been renewed for another 2 years, but I just want to liquidate it, get rid of it?
No, it has absolutely. So there's two kind of platforms that came out around the same time, right? There was ours, dnwe.com, and then Epic released Name Liquidate as well around the same time. And they're actually very different. In Name Liquidate, they're focused on names essentially that people are planning to drop, and so like when the domain enters expiration, they can put it up for to any kind of that Dutch reverse auction style and Name Liquidate. We're completely different. What we're actually looking for is domains that people don't want to drop because they have a certain level of liquidity. So we're actually looking for domains that investors paid a decent amount of money for, that would sell in an expired auction for at least $300 most of the time. So if someone submits a name that they just registered or they just picked up for $20, it's most likely going to not be a good fit for our platform. If it was a domain that they just paid, $400 for in a namejet auction, and now they're a little bit tight on cash and they just want to turn over a few names, they can list it for 400, 450, 500. There's a little bit of flexibility depending on what the market is doing and the data that we've got. And they can get their money back. So that's the general framework. It's not particularly geared to any type of status in terms of whether the domain is expiring on. It's more tied to the quality of the domain name.
Now who sets that pricing?
So we have a obviously my partner Josh Schoen and I are both heavily focused on the platform, and a lot of our time is going into the platform. But for the most part, we're both reviewing names manually. At the moment, he is the one who's doing most of the valuation of these names. But we typically are both doing them, so it's almost like a review panel. So we try to make sure that we're pricing them as fairly as possible. But obviously, we're still two guys that are reviewing hundreds of submissions every single day. So there's no doubt that sometimes we will maybe approve a name that we shouldn't have approved, or maybe not approve a name that we should have approved, right? It's one of those things that we're going to have to continue to fine tune. But having said that, part of the big value of our platform is that every single name that's on there has been curated by two people that do this and make and have done this for a while. So we do have names on the platform that people will say, hey, these are all good names, as opposed to, I've got to sift through all of the rubbish and I don't want to touch that, and that's a name that's actually okay. It's more like, these names are all okay. I could actually invest in any of these names and it would be viable.
Gotcha. So then in terms of, do you kind of see this? Because I look out over the future and I go, okay, hey, 5 years from now, you guys are probably going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of sales under your belt. And to a certain extent, I start thinking about, does your platform, obviously one of many, does it start or become or act like very much like an MLS of, in its own right?
Yeah, so it's very difficult to determine where this goes. But one thing that I do want to I do want to keep it as a private platform that is geared towards the investment community. So right. One of the reasons why I think that we've seen success is that this platform is supposed to be purely for the domain investor, while every other platform that you ever see get released, it's always geared towards end users. It's always geared towards putting up retail pricing. And we don't want anything to do with that. You submitted a domain at retail pricing, and we can't accept it because that's not the point of the platform. Our sell-through rate is somewhere in between 20 and 30% of the domains that get listed. And obviously, as we know, the sell-through rate to end users is going to be significantly lower than that.
1%, we can call it that.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to stay in our lane for the foreseeable future and just keep it a private platform for investors. And I think that they appreciate that. They have a venue that they can list names for, say, $500 on DNWE, but then also keep their $5,000 price tag on Afternic and Cedo and their landing pages, because if that end user comes along and buys the name, they got a $5,000 sale, they can remove the name from DNWE. If that end user doesn't come along, then they can get $500 in a more of a liquidation sale, and they know that it's gone to another, and they know that the likelihood is that it's gone to another investor. Obviously, we can't guarantee that investor is going to use it. Is not going to use it, right? They might be an investor that ends up using it, but what we can guarantee is that it was sold on a private platform that wasn't publicly available to everyone.
Now that's interesting. I never thought about that, from the standpoint of keeping the domain listed at a retail value and keeping the landing page there, but then listing it on the liquidation platform on dnwe.com. So that is really interesting. And so that provides something that hasn't necessarily always been there. Obviously, you could go and list retail, but in certain instances, you're probably left negotiating, sending emails back and forth with the wholesale market in most cases.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Exactly. I mean, you can list your names at retail, but if you if you list your name on Afternic or Cedo or whatever for a more of a liquid price, then you're actually also giving almost a false pretense of what the market is, right? So an end user comes along and buys a $20,000 name for $2,000 because this particular seller was just like, oh, I really need the cash right now. I need to liquidate this at a price that's going to move quickly at. And the end user that's watching it sees that domain and sees that it's just changed price to $2,000 and picks it up. So now that end user thinks, well, that's great. This name's worth $2,000 when, and actually, they just got an absolute steal.
Right.
So
that is interesting. And so, like, long term, where do you see DNWE going?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got over 700 users right now. Obviously, what we've seen over the last few weeks is we've got a lot more applications from people that you just don't know about. They have 30 to 40 domains. They're not exactly they're not like well-known active investors, but they do have small portfolios, and some of these guys have really, really great names. And I think that these are the type of people that can probably assist in bringing a little bit more liquidity to the market. Because while they're not active in auctions and those kind of things, they may be the type of person that logs into DNWE once in a while and sees a few great names at great prices and says, "Hey, I'd like to add that one to my portfolio," or "I'd like to add that one to my portfolio." So I think that we'll start to get a few more people that are less active in the industry onto the platform, and hopefully keep building it out and keep getting more and more names. But as of any kind of like MLS or anything like that, we probably want to keep it private for now.
Gotcha. So then even, I was asking about looking forward to the future of DNWE, but let's talk about just today's domain market and kind of where you see things headed into the future for the domain industry. I mean, so obviously at the time of this recording, we've been locked down. Shoot, how many weeks now? Countless, at least 6, 7.
Yeah. It's been best part of 2 months now, nearly, right?
Right. Something like that. And so what do you, I mean, in your opinion, has COVID actually impacted the domain industry?
Yeah. So there was the initial period at the end of March, last 2 weeks of March, I think it was. It was either the last 2 weeks of March or the first 2 weeks of March. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But there was a 2-week period where large portfolio holders saw a massive drop off. Everybody stopped spending, and you can probably remember when that was. It was when the stock market just completely went into free fall.
Right.
So at that same time, everything just came to a halt. Nobody bought anything, and then kind of as it just steadied and almost like hit the bottom of what we've seen so far. I'm not saying that there might be a new bottom. I'm not sure yet, but that's when people kind of realized, hey, we've got to keep operating a business here, or life needs to go on. How are we going to deal with the current circumstances? And I think a lot of smart businesses kind of said, hey, we're going into a digital world here. We need to have our digital strategy fine-tuned, and we need to make sure that we're set up in the best possible way to succeed in what is an ever-changing remote world, right? And the start of that is a domain name. So what I've seen since that point is a lot of large portfolio holders, myself as well. I'm not a large portfolio holder, but I've seen a huge increase in inquiries, and I've seen more sales on the lower end of the market, right? The kind of $5,000 names, and I think that market will continue to do well for a little while. I think that eventually the higher end names will start picking up again. I'm not saying they're not happening right now, because I have heard about at least a few six-figure sales in the last couple of weeks. The domain market is actually withstanding what's happening very, very well. I've seen a lot of investors say, "Hey, this is, the market's crashing, things are crashing." That's not actually completely valid right now. Domains are actually holding their own pretty well.
And that's interesting because, I would have figured about the same in terms of saying, one, this is forcing a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations who weren't online, or if they were online, in some cases upgrading their domain. But then also, we look, and I think as of the moment at this time of the recording, there's 25 million people that are unemployed. Yep. And not all 25 million are going to go out and start businesses, but you can likely say a good percentage of folks will. Now, whether or not they pay, three-figure, four-figure, mid-four-figure, or higher in terms of a domain name, that's yet to likely be determined. But the case in point is, in most cases, if they're going to go all in on this idea or this next business venture, they, like you said, they're going to need a domain.
Yeah. Listen, you and I know better than anyone else. It's very, very difficult to register a decent domain name.
It is.
Very, very difficult to register a decent domain name. Can you pick up a good domain name for your business from the $2,000 to $5,000 range? Absolutely. Absolutely. Can someone put that on their credit card and say, this is my investment towards hopefully building my business on and not having to rely on my old employer that just fired me? Yeah, I can see that.
And so it's one of those things that as time plays out, and who knows how long we're in for this, it's just kind of hang on. And I go, the old way of life, certainly in my belief, isn't coming back. But there will be a new life to look forward to, if you will, in terms of just how we go about living life. I think that more and more we'll probably see. We'll probably get back to in-person conferences, but likely is the case, you may see a hybrid, if not online, experiences for conferences. And so,
no doubt.
So from that standpoint, from the domain industry, what do you think? Obviously, there's just been much talk of a recession, or even something as gruesome as the Great Depression. Do you think that is something that will ultimately happen, or even lead to a domain crash? Because there are some folks that are like, the domain industry, it's going to crash.
The higher end might come down, continue to come down a little bit in value.
But things seem to be moving pretty, at least from what I can tell. Things at the lower end, and when I say lower end, it's like 5,000 and less, are moving.
Yeah, they're definitely moving. They're definitely moving. It's not I'm not guessing. I know it based on the things that I'm hearing back from very close connections within the industry that have 20, 30, 50,000 names.
Right.
So those names are definitely selling well.
Yeah, and that's it. That's the thing that, like I said, even before our call, I moved at least 80% of my domains over to, or at least parked them with Dan.com. And I was just seeing a surge of traffic as well as inquiries.
Yeah. And I did want to touch on this, is the fact that you said, hey, I think that what we're experiencing today is going to change a lot of how we operate going forward, regardless of the circumstances. And what I'll say about that is, people love simplicity and convenience, and something like a virtual domain conference is a good example, right? There would be a load more people that attended a virtual domain conference, even though the experience is obviously not as good. I would much prefer to go to an in-person one. There would be more people that attended a virtual conference because they could do it while sitting on their bed, and
it's cost friendly.
And it's cost friendly. And another example is, I'd never used Amazon Fresh until this whole thing broke out. And I can tell you that I will definitely be using Amazon Fresh in the future, because it's easy and simple. And you're gonna see that a lot of people come to a realization that, oh, it's much easier for me to do it this way. Or a business will say, hey, it's much easier for me to build my store online as opposed to renting out this space and selling my store on the high street. Why have I not been doing this all along? It's inevitable.
Now, Josh, if we look out over the course of time, let's just say 15 years from now, you and I are on mics having this same conversation. Let's hope that it does happen. 15 years out, we look back at this moment. What do you think will be said about this moment and how it impacted the domain industry?
That's a really good question. So if I could make a guess right now, I would say that this is actually the moment that the general public becomes a little bit more aware of what the industry actually has to offer and domain names in general. I think that more people are going to be interacting digitally than ever before. That's a fact. And as a result, there's just going to be more attention on the foundation to that digital environment, which is a domain name. So I think that this is going to be actually a little bit of a turning point for domains, which a lot of people kind of said have argued outside of the industry that domains have become a lot less relevant since Google basically messed everything up for us. But I think that you'll see that there's a turning point that happens again where people have a lot more of an appreciation for domain names, and hopefully, like I said, more people will come into the industry as investors and help legitimize what we're doing as obviously a bona fide way of doing business.
Now, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I certainly agree with that. That the hope is everything that you said when looking back, some 15 years from now. I truly hope that ultimately is the case. I know one of the things that I think about in terms of you looking at some of the new domain investors, and I'm like, man, if for those who are coming in, it's like that. I know my advice to them is certainly, it's like if you have the cash, definitely focus in on the one words. If you have that cash to be able to do so, but even if not, it's like, man, you can still find some very, very good 2-word deals that are .com.
100%. I think that you may end up seeing. I mean, don't get me wrong. 2-word.coms have gone up a lot in price over the last 5 years, but I don't think they've gone up as much as 1-word.coms have. A lot of the time, companies are choosing to brand off, good quality 2-word.coms. And I think that while a lot of the kind of investors and the people and brokers have gone out of their way to track down every single 1-word.com owner out there, they haven't done that yet, 2-word.coms. So there's still opportunity there.
So as we wrap up, what would be your advice to someone desiring to kick off their domain investing journey? Like, where should they start?
Yeah, I'll give the same advice that I give to people that reach out to me, and I would say that Domain Sherpa is your friend. I mean, the guys, Andrew Rosner from Media Options there's no better person to listen to when it comes to this industry, and he's obviously on Domain Sherpa most of the time. Domain Shane Coltra, he's on Domain Sherpa all the time, and I mean he talks a lot of sense, and he runs a great blog, which is another great area that new investors can learn about the industry. But yeah, I would make sure that you spend time listening to those kind of videos, reading those blogs from people that have a background of doing well in the industry, that that you can actually say, hey, this person has sold this, or this person has sold that, or this person owns these names, and you can actually say, yeah, this person knows what they're talking about, as opposed to listening to what some ambiguous username on NamePros is telling you about investing in new GTLDs, because quite frankly,
don't do it.
Exactly, but unfortunately, a lot of investors will end up taking that path because it's the easier path to entry. But yeah, I would say my primary advice would actually be to read the blogs, watch Domain Sherpa, and probably sign up for the DN Academy if you can.
Certainly. So then, last but not least, is there anything else that you'd like to share with listeners, like how listeners can get in contact with you if they had questions about DNWE?
Yeah, so my personal email is jr@joshreason.com. You'll see me on Twitter quite frequently if you follow the industry at all. My Twitter handle is twitter.com/josh.co, and that's dot spelled out. You can schedule an appointment to talk to me at josh.co as well. I'm always happy to jump on the phone with people that are interested in taking that step into the industry, because like I said, I would like to see more investors get involved, and I would like to see the industry continue to grow.
Well, certainly, man. Certainly. Well, with that, man, we're out of time. So, Josh, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your entrepreneurial and domain investing journey.
Thanks for having me, Alvin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Kickstart Commerce, where we share search marketing and domain name strategies to help grow your business. Please subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or Podbean. Last but not least, please visit kickstartcommerce.com to subscribe to the newsletter, sharing tips and tricks about the disciplines of digital strategy. Thanks, and that's all for now.